Kim Corbin, the social media manager at New World Library. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with author Karuna Cayton to talk about his book, The Misleading Mind, How We Create Our Own Problems and How Buddhist Psychology Can Help Us to Solve Them. I hope that you'll enjoy the interview and the book. The ideas in your book, The Misleading Mind, are rooted in Buddhism. In order to reap their benefits, do your readers need to become practicing Buddhists, or will those with no understanding of Buddhism be able to adopt your techniques?
Right. So that question, that's sort of the intent of the book itself. It's designed to let people know that the ideas in Buddhist thought are universal. So no, people don't have to become Buddhists, because I think the ideas apply to anybody. And the motivation and the mission of the book is to help people understand that these ideas, which are 2,500 years old, are tested and been examined and researched for thousands and hundreds of years. And the idea is to help people understand that they don't have to dig deep into Buddhist philosophy and psychology like I've had to. Mm-hmm. They can have access right away.
Right. Did all the heavy lifting for him.
Yeah, I did heavy lifting. Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. And what would you say is the primary cause of suffering in our lives, and what can we do about it?
That word suffering is a big word in Buddhist thought, and it's not I don't think it's the best word. So, because, usually we think suffering, we're thinking of, people starving or some sort of automobile accident or tragedy, the tsunami. And in Buddhist thought, in Buddhist psychology, the idea of suffering is that anything that where we're not operating or living in our potential of what we could be, the contrast to that is considered suffering. In other words, what we think of as happiness from the Buddhist point of view, Buddhist psychology would say, well, that's not really happiness. You could have this. This is what real happiness is and what it looks like. So, that idea of suffering, I'm not sure, I've never come up with a perfect word or synonym. It's things like lack of fulfillment, lack of contentment, lack of satisfaction, those kinds of things. So that actually takes some deeper research and understanding what that means. So, yeah.
And what would you say causes that lack of fulfillment in our lives?
Really, it's strange. We look at other forms of psychology and philosophy, they don't say exactly the same thing that in Buddhist psychology. What we say is it's by not understanding how things are. In other words, not understanding, when I relate with you, if you cause me some difficulty, some pain, it's because I'm responding to some sort of projection of who I think you are. And that happens, that's in a grand scale, but it goes all the way down into a very minute scale of, this tea doesn't taste very good, or, I'm feeling a little bit off today. It's all how we see things, and there's one saying that I like Anais Nin said, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And I think that is really a central Buddhist. So it's the idea of not knowing. That's the cause.
Right.
So the solution is knowing.
Right. And you say it's important for us to befriend our problems.
Oh, yeah.
What does that mean, and how does that look?
Yeah, that I get asked that a lot, and it's a controversial, provocative idea, which I like. It's not a very useful idea if one doesn't understand, make the shift from understanding how we work with problems. So the first thing is to understand we have problems, we want to get over them, the idea of problems, back to what we were talking about a minute ago about being unfulfilled and unhappy. And then that's unhappiness, right? It's not, I've got a good house, I got a good life. We're not talking about that level of happiness. We're talking about this other level where we don't seem to have a very trained mind, a very tamed mind. We're not in control. Anything happens, our mind just immediately, it's very, very flippant and very, very unstable. Mm-hmm. So the idea of mental health or happiness is a stable mind. If you really, really want to achieve that, then the only way to achieve that is by facing the stuff in your mind, the crap, really. And so when we talk about friends being problems, those are the learning moments, those are the learning experiences. There's no way out but to confront and deal and learn how to deal with them, not as enemies necessarily, but as teachers. That's one metaphor. And then our life becomes so amazing because we're learning all the time, because we've got problems all the time.
Right. There's always new material to work with.
New material. But this is the key is when we change our focus from an outer locus for happiness to an inner locus, then we have no choice but to be dealing with the stuff and facing it and confronting the stuff that comes up. And yes, those are the things that enlighten us. There's no other way. If we research and ask our friends, you say, hey, you're really a kind person, or you're really patient, these kinds of things. Most of the time, if you really were to interview them, it usually came back to some difficulty they had in their life. When I was a kid, we were poor, whatever. We had a car accident, tragic accident, and so that to me is that event, those events, those difficult times became their friends. But it's not like we don't wish suffering on anybody. It's not like that.
Right.
It's more like helpers,
right?
Or aids,
And finding the lessons within.
And finding the lessons within.
Yeah.
That's the main issue about this problems becoming friends idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what would you say is the most critical factor as far as people adopting the tools and ideas that you outline in The Misleading Mind?
Well, willingness. That's the main thing. Secondly is that at least being curious about that there could be a different way that things exist than how they appear to us. Then the third one would be, okay, I need to begin looking at the world from an inner locus rather than merely from an outer locus. It doesn't deny the outer world. It's just saying, really get over these problems, even global problems, I think, and not only myself, but many people, has to do with a shift internally. Yeah. Global warming, violence, war, poverty, all of these things I really believe would have just shift if we began from the inside out. And we do have to make outer changes, but when the inner, if we're not at peace inside, there's no way I think we can create peace outside. For example, if we have a poverty consciousness, how can we relieve the poverty in the world? It just doesn't work. Or a greedy consciousness, a greedy attitude. So I think that answered part of your question.
Yeah. It does. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for writing this book and for sitting down to talk to me about it. And I know it's already helped so many people and that it's going to continue to do so.
I hope so. Yeah, that's the goal.
Great.
That was the purpose. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.